Talking Marshall spring football with Steve Cotton, voice of the Thundering Herd. Steve, has Doc talked anything about what he's going to do as far as a backup quarterback?
Well, it's try to get Blake Frohnapple as ready as he can through this spring, and then, if all goes well and there's no, aggravation of the injury or anything like that, he'll be full tilt for fall camp, and we'll get a big look then. And then Gunnar Holcomb's a quarterback they signed out of Florida, and right now that's it. You've got those three guys, and Rakeem's the only one who's ever played it down to college football.
With Marshall and Doc Holliday getting his third season starting, kind of feel like he's got the program going in the right direction. I mean, you talked about the stars he's got on offense. I mean, the offense seems to be there. Defense is going to be young this year, but it looks like he's got the program going in the right direction. I
don't think there's any doubt about that. Marshall has taken it took a while to get his program in place, his philosophy. He plays a different style of football, and that shows up mainly on offense, I think. You recruit different kind of offensive linemen and develop them differently than you do in the previous regime. So that was the thing. Doc said when he was hired, day one, he said, it's going to take 3 years to get an offensive line put together the way I want it. So he's not even there yet. And I do think that it just looks head and shoulders different right now than it did before spring ball 2 years, for his first year. And there are so many fewer unknowns. We've hit on the unknowns because that's kind of what you do in spring practice. Everybody wants to know about that, but there are a whole lot of things that are pretty well settled and are good situations, a whole lot more than we've had in a while.
Hey, Steve, I noticed the Big Green Scholarship Foundation is having their banquet on the same weekend as the spring football game, which I think is great. They've got Chad Pennington coming in and hosting it, and then they've got, the former ball players coming in, Bradshaw, Chris Crocker, Mario Harvey, Leftwich, Legursky, and I love it when they set things up like that, so those kids that are playing for Marshall now can see those guys. Some of them are probably still teammates. Some of the guys that are still there, still teammates with those guys coming back that are playing pro now. But I love when they set things up like that.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge weekend. Marshall's done a good job the last few years of incorporating not only the spring game, but putting the Big Green fundraising banquet that same time. And you're exactly right. It's good for the fans, the boosters, the folks who make it possible to finance a lot of what Marshall's trying to do. But the secondary, and sometimes I think maybe it's even hidden, but a bigger thing is the way that the current Marshall football players do get to see what happens and hear from guys who've done it right and who've made the most of their opportunity. Some of them came in pretty highly recruited, but some of them, weren't known as much of anything when they got to Marshall, and they just took advantage of that and made themselves into NFL football players. And, that's the goal of pretty much every single guy who, goes and plays college football. That's the dream. They'd like a chance to do that someday.
Well, yeah, I remember a couple years ago I was at one of the banquets and they inducted Chad into the Marshall Hall of Fame, and he talked about when he played football at Marshall, the reason they were so good when he was there is because they all spent time together. They all hung out with each other. They'd, throw their money together, go out and buy some burgers and have a cookout together. And, they developed kind of that brotherhood. And he talked about that. And he said, if you want to win football games, you've got to want to win. You have to play hard. But he's like, you got to spend time with each other too.
Yeah, that all goes into making it not only a team of good players, but a successful program. And what better guy could you possibly come up with? Could anybody possibly come up with to kind of headline that and to be the driving force behind it than a Chad Pennington, a guy who, was not only a talented football player, but the total package in terms of the academic part of it, the hard work part, the leadership, all that kind of thing. So, and a great communicator on top of that, a guy who's now doing his thing with TV. So, Chad kind of putting that together, keeps in touch with those guys and kind of headlines this. And, he and Mike D'Antoni are kind of the faces behind Marshall's fundraising campaign as it tries to build some new facilities, including a football indoor practice facility, or not just for football. A lot of sports will be able to make use of that. So, to have guys like that come back, it speaks a whole lot about the school and the things they're trying to do.
Hey, Steve, I know it's early, but I'm looking at Marshall's schedule, and of course, we kind of look ahead and can do that. I know coaches can, but when you look at the football schedule coming up for the Herd, Another tough schedule, but when you look at the Conference USA schedule, what's your thoughts on that part of the schedule? I mean, does Houston take a step back? Is East Carolina bouncing back? What about Central Florida, Southern Miss? Of course, some of those teams playing their final year in the Conference USA as well. How does the Conference USA look from the Marshall standpoint?
Well, my first thought is that upon that initial glance, it's a whole lot more manageable schedule than it was last season when you just had things stacked up and you knew it was going to be very difficult to get off to a good start. Well, things are broken up a little more. You're what should be most talented teams aren't coming back to back to back and that kind of thing. Now, you're going to have to go to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That's going to be tough, but they've got a new coach. Houston not only lost a huge group of seniors and has a new coach, they have to come to Huntington this year. Same thing with Tulsa. It's a team that loses a quarterback and some outstanding playmakers and now has to make the return trip to Huntington. So I'm not saying it's easy to beat those teams even in that situation, but those are three of the very best from last year, and Marshall should be in a much better spot against at least two of those, and at least a wash in that you play Southern Miss on the road. But they're going to be kind of learning a new system. So I think it's much more manageable. You've got a trip to East Carolina. The Pirates are still struggling to get things going under their third-year coach. UCF is going to be good, but they come to Huntington, so a much more manageable schedule. Last year there were only 5 home games. This year there are 6. Ohio's in Huntington. Western Carolina, you figure, is a whole lot more manageable a game you ought to win compared to playing the 3 1A teams on the road last year. So there are certainly still challenges, but it's one that's much more conducive to turning in a good season. And ultimately, you want to fight for a Conference USA Division championship, and I think that is certainly out there for the taking this year.
In the non-conference schedule as well, Steve, that's not as daunting as it was last year. Of course, you still have West Virginia on there, which you open up the season on September 1st, but you don't have a Virginia Tech on there. You've got to go to West Lafayette to take on Purdue, but I mean, I think it's a little bit more manageable non-conference schedule as well.
No doubt about it, and boy, if you can get a couple of wins early, if you can go win one of those road games, how much confidence does that build? And you carry that into, like we said, the conference schedule that isn't quite as daunting, and all of a sudden, maybe you're putting together the kind of year that everybody hopes for.
Steve, I know being in Huntington and, of course, Final Four weekend coming up this weekend, you've got the big matchup tomorrow night, Kentucky against Louisville. What's your thoughts on that game?
Boy, Kentucky, I think if Kentucky plays its average game, somebody else is going to have to play great to beat them. Mm-hmm. If Kentucky plays a good game, I don't see anybody beating them. Now, they've still got to go do it, but, there are 3 or 4 guys on that team who are going to be as good as anybody else has at that position, and you'd better really be on your game and hope that they're off and just miss a bunch of shots or something, or Kentucky could I wouldn't be shocked if Kentucky were to go out this weekend and win 2 games by double digits. They're just that mm-hmm. good.
Yeah. I definitely think Saturday might be the better of the 2 games than maybe even the national championship game if Kentucky wins.
Wouldn't be surprised at all. Louisville does have some, I think, style matchup things that favor them from letting Kentucky get out and run away from them. So, and they have some guards who can maybe handle the Kentucky pressure and athleticism better than anybody else in the Final Four. You're right.
All right, sounds good. Hey, Steve, we appreciate it. I'm sure we're going to be talking a little bit more, maybe trying to get you on one more time before the spring game gets here and talk a little Marshall football. I know there's some fans here in the Panhandle that like to hear about the Herd, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, Fred, Angela, have a good weekend.
All right, thanks, Steve.